I found my husband in our living room with my son's fiance only a few hours before the wedding. I was about to confront him, but a movement in the hallway stopped me. It was my son, Elijah. His face was a mask of stone. He looked at me and whispered, "Mom, I already know, and it's worse than you think." Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I start my story, I'd love to know what city you're joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now, let me immerse you in this story. On the morning of my son's wedding, I woke up at 5 o'clock. I couldn't sleep. I told myself it was just nerves, the kind any mother feels on such an important day. I sat here in this very home office, staring at spreadsheets on my computer screen. I run a small CPA firm from home. Nothing extravagant, but it helped pay for our son Elijah's college and covered the extras that my husband Franklin's salary didn't quite reach. The numbers on the screen were a blur. My mind was somewhere else entirely. Outside, the world was still dark and silent, but I could already picture the scene that would unfold on the patio of our Atlanta, Georgia estate in just a few hours. White chairs arranged in perfect rows on the lawn. I had spent the entire spring tending to the arch that Franklin had built, covering it with the rose bushes I had nurtured since they were tiny buds. I had checked the string lights 3 times myself, making sure not a single bulb was out. Everything had to be perfect. Our son, our Elijah, deserved a perfect day. 25 years of marriage to Franklin, 23 years raising Elijah. I had dedicated my entire life to this family. I had been the steady hand, the planner, the one who remembered dental appointments and birthdays, and made sure the bills were paid on time. Franklin was the charmer, the life of the party, the one everyone loved. I was the foundation he leaned on, and for a long time, that was enough for me. But lately, something had felt off. A silent distance had settled between us. It was in the way he would stop talking when I walked into a room, in the way his phone was always tilted away from me. When I asked if something was wrong, he would simply laugh it off. "Just work, honey," he'd say. "Big promotion on the line." I chose to believe him. What else could I do? You don't toss 25 years of history overboard because of a feeling. The click of the office door brought me back to the present. It was Elijah, standing there in his pajamas, a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. At his age, he had my practical nature, but his father's handsome features. "Mom, you've been up for hours," he said. "The wedding isn't until 4 o'clock. "I just want everything to be perfect for my boy," I said, attempting a cheerful smile as I closed my laptop. "Your dad is still sleeping. He left early," Elijah said with a strange note in his voice. He walked over and sat on the edge of my desk, suddenly looking much younger. He said something about picking up a gift for Madison's parents, the Ellingtons. I frowned. That was new to me. "Mom," he said, hesitating, "can I ask you something?" I turned my chair to face him. Under the harsh light of my desk lamp, his worry was evident. "What's on your mind, sweetie?" He took a deep breath. "Do you think Madison really loves me?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Madison, his fiancée, ambitious, beautiful, a young architect from a wealthy, lifelong family with influence. On the surface, she was everything we had always wanted for Elijah. But I'd had my own doubts. I had seen how her eyes would sometimes drift when Elijah talked about his passions, how she checked her phone during family dinners. "Why would you ask that, honey? It's your wedding day." "I know, and maybe it's just last-minute jitters," he mumbled, staring into his coffee. "But sometimes when she looks at me, I feel like she's looking right through me, like I'm just a box she needed to check off on her way to the perfect life." He paused. "And lately, she's been spending a lot of time with Dad. They're always talking about finances, investments. She says he's mentoring her." I wanted to tell him about the things I had also noticed, how Franklin's eyes followed Madison around the room, how he always found excuses to help her with her coat or refill her drink, how he knew exactly how she liked her coffee, 2 sugars and a splash of milk, without having to ask. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Wedding jitters are normal, sweetie. Marriage is the biggest step you'll ever take." "It's not just jitters, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. He finally looked up at me. his eyes filled with a pain that terrified me. "I think she's in love with someone else." I froze. The blood turned to ice. "What makes you say that?" "Little things," he whispered. "The way she lights up when Dad calls, how she always asks about him first when she comes over. I saw them in the garden yesterday, just talking, and the way he looked at her. It wasn't how a father-in-law should look at his son's fiancée." I felt a flush rise up my neck. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Elijah, that's a very serious accusation." "I know," he said, shrugging, "and I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong." Before I could reply, the door opened again. It was Franklin. He was already dressed in an impeccable shirt and dress slacks, looking immaculate as always. "Well, look at my two favorite people," he exclaimed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He seemed surprised to see Elijah there. "Big day, son. You should be getting ready." He turned his attention to me. "And you, Simone, you're going to wear yourself out. Madison just called. She's coming by around 10 o'clock to discuss some last-minute seating chart details." I watched Elijah's expression tighten. "What details?" he asked. "Oh, you know, just making sure her parents don't sit next to your Uncle James after that political argument last Christmas," Franklin said with a dismissive wave. "You know how special her family is. We should discuss it privately because of the politics and all that." "Of course," Elijah said, his voice flat. "We can't have the wrong people sitting together." The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I watched my husband and my son, and I knew deep in my soul that Elijah wasn't wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. After Franklin and Elijah left my office, a cold dread seized me. I was supposed to have a final call with the caterer at 10:30, a call I had been planning for weeks. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, and called them. I told them I had a family emergency and needed to reschedule. It was a lie. The truth was, I had cleared my entire morning. I couldn't shake Elijah's words, nor the nauseating feeling that Franklin's false cheer had provoked. Something was happening in my house today, and for the first time in 25 years, I intended to find out what it was. I spent the next 2 hours pretending to be busy. I tidied the kitchen, which was already spotless. I rearranged the floral centerpieces on the dining room table. Every sound made me jump. Every passing car made my heart hammer against my ribs. I felt like an actress in a play, performing the role of the happy mother of the groom, while inside I twisted with anxiety. Exactly at 10 o'clock, a sleek white BMW pulled into our driveway, Madison's car. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out. Even in simple jeans and a blouse, she looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She walked up to the front door with the natural confidence of someone who knows she belongs. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I crept out the back door and circled the house, crouching low behind the large hydrangea bushes that bordered our living room windows. I felt ridiculous, like a spy in my own home, but the need to know, the need to confirm my fears or dispel them was overwhelming. Through the large bay window, I could see them. Franklin had let her in, and they were standing by the fireplace, the spot where we took our family pictures every Christmas. He was pouring her a drink. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language said it all. They stood close, too close. His hand rested low on her back. It was a casual gesture, one that could be easily explained away, but it lingered there for a second too long. I clenched my hands into fists, my nails digging into my palms. 25 years we had built a life in this house. We had read stories to Elijah on that very sofa. We had hosted countless family parties in that room. And now my husband was standing there, caressing another woman, my son's fiancée, on our son's wedding day. I was about to stand up, to storm in like a fury, and confront them right then and there. I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care about the wedding. I only cared about the scorching betrayal I was witnessing. But then I noticed movement in the upstairs hallway, a shadow in the glass's reflection. I looked closer. It was Elijah. He was standing at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, watching them too. The sight of him, so still and broken, stopped me cold. This wasn't just my pain, it was his. Downstairs, things had escalated. Madison's hand was now on Franklin's chest. She leaned into him, her head tilted back, a smile playing on her lips. She said something, and he laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Light, genuine, happy, the way he used to laugh with me when we were young, and everything seemed possible. In that moment, I saw my husband transform into someone I didn't recognize, someone alive in a way he hadn't been with me for a long, long time. Then his hands were in her hair, and they were kissing. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind you see in movies. My vision went red. A roar filled my ears. I took a step toward the house, ready to rip the door from its hinges, ready to scream until my lungs gave out. And then a hand gripped my arm. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Elijah. He had slipped out of the house and come to find me. His face was pale, ashen, but his eyes burned with a cold, hard determination I had never seen before. "Mom, don't," he whispered, his voice strained. "Not yet, Elijah. This is—" I choked on the words. I couldn't even say it. "I know what it is," he said. His voice was steady, though I could see his hands trembling. "Mom, I've known for weeks." "Weeks?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. I stared at my son, the boy I had raised, who now looked at me with the eyes of a man who had seen too much. We were still crouched behind the hydrangeas. The beautiful flowers I'd been so proud of were now serving as a hiding place for the destruction of our family. Inside the house, my husband and my son's fiance had moved from the fireplace to the sofa. I couldn't bear to look. "I didn't want to believe it at first," Elijah said, his voice low and urgent. "I kept making excuses for them. He's just being kind. She's just nervous about joining the family." But it kept happening. The lingering looks, the private conversations, the way she lit up whenever he was near. He corrected himself. The slip-up, a painful reminder of a life that no longer existed. She was supposed to be getting a new mother figure, not a rival. "I mean Madison. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of shock and a strange, protective rage. "You shouldn't have had to carry this alone." "Because I needed proof," he said, his jaw clenched. "And because—" he looked at me, his eyes much older than his 23 years. "I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves." He pulled out his phone. His hands shook slightly as he tapped the screen. "I hired someone," he confessed. "What did you do?" "What? I'm not stupid, Mom. After I saw them having lunch together a month ago, a lunch Dad told me was a business meeting and she told me was an afternoon shopping with her girlfriends. I knew I wasn't crazy. I needed to know the truth." He handed me the phone. "I hired a private investigator." My breath hitched. "A detective? Elijah, the money—" "Don't worry about the money," he said grimly. "It was worth every single cent." The first photo on the screen showed Franklin and Madison walking into the St. Regis Atlanta downtown. The timestamp indicated it was 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday afternoon, when Franklin was supposedly at a regional sales conference. The second photo showed them leaving together 2 hours later, looking heated and disheveled. "There are 17 different occasions," Elijah said quietly, as I scrolled through a gallery of betrayal. Photos of them in dimly lit restaurants across the city. Photos of them pressed up against Franklin's car in a private parking lot. Photos of them laughing, holding hands, living a completely different life behind our backs. I felt sick. The sheer magnitude of the deceit was breathtaking. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a calculated, long-term affair. I stood up again. A fresh wave of rage washed over me. "We're stopping this," I said, my voice like steel. "Right now." "No." Elijah's voice was sharp, making me crouch down again. "Mom, trust me. I have a plan." "A plan, Elijah? This is insane. We can't just let the wedding—" "Absolutely we can," he cut in, his voice ringing with an authority I'd never heard from him before. "And we will. Mom, think about it. If we confront them now, what happens? They'll deny it, they'll twist it. Dad will say you're being hysterical, that you're misunderstanding things. Madison will cry and play the victim. They'll turn it all back on us. He was right. I could already hear Franklin's smooth, placating voice. "Simone, you're overreacting. She's a nervous young woman, and I was just offering paternal advice." "So what do you suggest?" I whispered, my anger giving way to a cold, terrifying clarity. Elijah's smile was something chilling and unfamiliar. "Public humiliation," he said, the words hanging in the air between us. "Total and absolute destruction of their reputations. Legal consequences. We don't just end this, Mom. We make sure they can never, ever do this to anyone again." I looked at my son. When had he become so calculating, so ruthless? Then I looked back through the window. I saw my husband, the man I had loved and trusted for a quarter of a century, start to unbutton Madison's blouse on the sofa where we had built our family. And in that moment, I knew the woman I used to be, the understanding, forgiving wife, was gone. She had died right there in the dirt, behind the flowers I had so painstakingly planted. "Tell me the plan," I said. That evening was one of the strangest of my life. Franklin came home acting as if nothing had happened, asking about final catering arrangements. Madison had left hours before, and he was the picture of the loving husband and proud father. He talked about his speech for the reception, about how proud he was of Elijah. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. I just nodded and smiled, an empty shell of myself, while inside, I screamed. After Franklin went to bed, Elijah and I met in my home office. The door was locked, the blinds drawn. It felt like a war room, and in many ways, it was. On my desk lay the beginnings of a file of evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. "Tell me about that detective," I said, studying a surveillance photo that turned my stomach. "Her name is Aisha," Elijah said. "Aisha Whitfield." The name hit me like a splash of cold water. "Aisha. My sister, Aisha." Elijah nodded. "I didn't know who else to call. I knew she was a cop for 20 years before retiring and starting her own PI agency. I knew she was smart and she'd be discreet." He looked a little sheepish. "I also knew she never really liked Dad." I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a sob. "My little sister, Aisha." We were close, but I hadn't told her about the growing distance with Franklin. I had been too proud, too ashamed to admit my marriage might be failing. "I'll call her," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Aisha answered on the second ring. "Simone, it's past midnight. Is everything okay?" "No, Aisha, nothing is okay." And then the dam broke. I told her everything. What Elijah suspected, what we had witnessed that morning, the photos. I cried ugly, choked sobs for the first time all day. She listened patiently, her voice calm and firm on the other end of the line. There was no shock or surprise, just a grim acceptance. "I'm not surprised, Simone," she said quietly when I finished. "I've seen the way he looks at that girl. I was hoping I was wrong." "Elijah told me about the photos," I said, wiping my eyes. "What else do you have?" "More than you probably want to know." Her voice turned professional. "I've been tracking their movements for 3 weeks. They meet twice a week like clockwork at the St. Regis Atlanta. He always pays in cash. They eat lunch at fancy restaurants he'd never take you to. Last week, he took her to Cartier." I felt that flush of rage again. Our money. The money I managed so carefully. The money that was supposed to be for our retirement, for our future. "And Simone," Aisha's voice was soft, "there's more now. Something bigger. I've been digging into Franklin's financials, trying to figure out where all this cash for the hotel rooms and gifts is coming from. He's been sloppy." "What did you find?" I asked, dreading the answer. There was a long pause on the line. "It's not just Madison," she said, voice heavy. "It's not the first time. I found a series of regular monthly payments going back 15 years, always to the same person, a woman named Nicole Jenkins." The name meant nothing to me. "Who is she?" I did some digging. She was a junior associate at his old firm when Elijah was a child. She left abruptly about 15 years ago. The payments started a few months after she left. Aisha took a deep breath. "Simone, she has a daughter." a 15-year-old girl named Zoe. I ran a background check. The father isn't listed on the birth certificate, but I'd bet my license that Franklin is her father. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I couldn't breathe. A daughter, an entire other child. 15 years of lies, 15 years of a double life. The secret trips, the inexplicable expenses, the emotional distance. It all clicked into horrible clarity. "I have to know for sure, Aisha," I whispered. "I know," she said. "I'll handle it. But Simone, you have to be prepared. When this drops, it's going to be a nuclear bomb." "I know," I said, my voice cold and hard. "That's exactly what we're counting on." The 24 hours leading up to the wedding were a blur of calculated deception. I moved through the preparations like a ghost, my body on autopilot while my mind raced. I smiled at relatives. I approved the final table settings with the wedding planner. I even helped Franklin with his tie, my fingers brushing the silk fabric as I imagined tightening it around his neck. Every interaction was a performance, every polite word a lie. Aisha worked quickly. She was a professional, and this was now personal. She told me she had a contact at a private lab. "It's risky, Simone, but if we can get a clean DNA sample from Franklin, we can get a non-legal preliminary comparison to a sample from the girl." That night, after Franklin fell asleep, snoring softly beside me in the bed we had shared for a quarter century, I crept out of the room. My heart pounded with every creak of the floorboard. I went to the bathroom and took his toothbrush from its holder. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. It felt like the ultimate violation. But what was this compared to the violations he had committed against me, against our family? I carefully tucked it into a plastic bag and left it in the mailbox for Aisha to collect before dawn. The next day, as the house buzzed with the chaotic energy of florists and photographers, Aisha called. "I've got more on the money," she said, her voice grim. "It's worse than we thought." We met in my car, parked on the street, away from the house, the only place I felt safe to talk. She opened a laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet, a dizzying array of numbers and dates. "I did a full analysis of your joint accounts, your retirement funds, everything," she said, pointing to a highlighted column. "Look at the pattern. For years, Franklin has been making regular cash withdrawals. Small amounts, 500 here, 700 there, never more than 1,000 at a time, always from different branches." "I thought it was for his hobby," I said, stunned. "He always told me he was investing in rare coins, something that required cash transactions." Another lie. "His hobby was named Madison," Aisha said dryly. "The cash for the hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the gifts, that Cartier necklace. He paid for half of it in cash, but that's not the worst part." She clicked another tab. "He's been taking loans out against your pension plan." I stared at the screen. There it was in black and white. A series of loans taken out against the retirement account I had so diligently contributed to from my small business. The account that was supposed to be our safety net, our security for old age. He had drained almost $60,000 in the last 18 months. "How?" I whispered. "He would have needed my signature." "He forged it," Aisha said quietly. "I compared the signature on the loan documents to your signature on your tax returns. It's a good forgery, but it's not yours." A wave of nausea hit me. This was beyond deceit. This was theft. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was systematically dismantling our future, piece by piece, to fund his sordid affair. He was robbing me of the college fund we had built, of the life we were supposed to share. He was gambling with my entire future. "And Madison?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "She's not an innocent victim," Aisha said, her gaze hard. "I'll get to her, but first, there's something else." She hesitated. Then she handed me a large manila envelope. "The preliminary DNA results came in this morning." My hands began to shake as I opened it. I scanned the page. The scientific jargon blurred until I found the conclusion at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. I stared at the words until they were burned into my memory. Zoe Jenkins was Franklin's daughter. 15 years. 15 years of loving him, trusting him, building a life with him while he had another daughter, another family hidden in the shadows. I rested my head on the steering wheel, the cool leather against my hot forehead. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. A strange, terrifying calm came over me. The pain was still there, a massive gaping wound in my chest. But now it was accompanied by something else. A cold, hard resolve. He wasn't just going to lose his wife. He was going to lose everything. Sitting in the car with my sister, that flimsy piece of paper in my hand felt heavier than a tombstone. It was the death certificate of my marriage, of the life I thought I had. A 15-year-old daughter. The words echoed in the silent car. How? How did you find her? I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. Aisha's expression was a mix of pity and professional resolve. It started with the payments. Once I had Nicole Jenkins's name. It wasn't hard to locate her. She lives just 2 towns over, Simone about 20 miles away. 20 miles? For 15 years, he had been living a secret life a short drive away. How many times had he told me he was working late? How many business dinners had he attended? How many weekend golf trips had he taken? My mind spun as I mentally reviewed years of excuses and lies, each one now taking on a new, sinister meaning. I swung by the house yesterday morning, Aisha continued, her voice soft. I posed as a market researcher. Nicole opened the door, and behind her I saw the girl. Zoe. Simone. She's the spitting image of him. The same dark, intelligent eyes that first drew me to him all those years ago. The same smile. She's unmistakable. I imagined it. An innocent teenager in all this, who looked just like my husband. A sister my son never knew he had. The thought was so surreal, so monstrous, that I couldn't fully process it. My family wasn't just broken, it was a fraud. A carefully constructed lie that I had unknowingly helped maintain for more than half my life. Does the mother, Nicole, know about me? About Elijah? I asked. I can't say for sure, Aisha admitted. But the way she lives, a nice house in a good school district, but no flashy career, it's clear Franklin is her primary source of financial support. She has every reason to keep things quiet. He wasn't just paying child support, Simone. He was funding her whole life with my money, with our money, my consulting money, our joint savings, the money he stole from our retirement. The betrayal was so deep, so layered. I felt like I was drowning. It was a systematic plunder of my life's work, my trust, and my future. I handed the DNA report back to Aisha. Put it with the rest of the evidence, I said. My voice, stripped of emotion, was numb. The shock was so profound, it had short-circuited my ability to feel anything but a cold, heavy emptiness. I thought about that girl, Zoe. What kind of man tells his daughter he can't acknowledge her? What kind of man raises one son in the light while keeping another child hidden in the dark? The cruelty, not just to me and Elijah, but to this innocent girl, was astonishing. And what about Madison? I asked, needing to shift my focus, to latch onto a target for the anger that was starting to melt the ice in my veins. You said there was more on her. Aisha nodded, her expression hardening again. Right, Madison. Let's talk about the fiance. She turned the laptop back to me and opened a new file. She's not just sleeping with your husband. She's been embezzling funds from her law firm. The words took a moment to register. She's a junior partner at a prestigious downtown firm, Aisha explained, displaying documents that looked like internal financial reports. She's been inflating expense reports, creating fake invoices for non-existent consultants, and siphoning the money into a private bank account. They aren't large amounts each time, but it's steady. In the last year, she's stolen over $200,000. I gasped. $200,000? And I can trace some of that money directly to gifts for Franklin, Aisha said, showing me a bank transfer followed by a credit card statement that showed the purchase of a $1,000 watch. She was stealing from her partners to buy gifts for her lover, who was stealing from his wife to buy gifts for her. It's the most perfectly disgusting circle of deceit I've ever seen. So Madison wasn't just a homewrecker. She was a criminal, a thief, and she was about to marry my son, bringing her corruption and lies into the heart of what was left of my family. The numbness in my chest vanished, replaced by a white-hot fury. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was about protecting my son. This was about justice. This was about making sure these two people faced the consequences for every lie, every dollar, every broken promise. "Okay," I said, looking my sister in the eye. "The wedding plan. Let's go over it one more time. I want it to be perfect." The knowledge of Madison's embezzlement added a dark, criminal layer to the already stunning betrayal. It changed everything. This was no longer just a messy, heartbreaking domestic drama. It was a conspiracy of fraud and theft perpetrated by the two people who should have been closest to us. "How did you get all this?" I asked Aisha, pointing to the damning financial documents on her laptop screen. We were still in my car, the air thick with the smell of conspiracy and stale coffee. "Madison isn't as smart as she thinks," Aisha said with grim satisfaction. "She got careless, and I have friends on the police force who were willing to pull some strings when they heard the story. A buddy of mine on the Economic Crimes Unit took one look at these patterns and knew exactly what he was seeing." She pointed to the screen. She was moving the money through a shell corporation she set up using her mother's maiden name. It was amateur. I thought of Madison's parents, the Ellingtons. They were pillars of the community. Her father was a respected federal judge. Her mother was on the board of 3 different charities. They moved in circles where reputation was everything. They believed their daughter was a shining star on the rise, marrying into a good, stable family. They had no idea their golden girl was a thief, and the stable family she was marrying into was a house of cards built on lies. The public humiliation was going to destroy them, too. For a fleeting instant, I felt a pang of pity for them. They were innocent collateral damage, but that feeling was quickly extinguished by the fire of my own betrayal. "So Franklin is stealing our retirement money to buy gifts for his mistress," I summarized, the words tasting like venom. "And Madison is stealing from her firm to buy gifts for my husband, her lover, who is also her future father-in-law." I shook my head in disbelief. "This is movie stuff." "It gets better," Aisha said, a wry twist to her lips. "Some of the money Franklin took out of your pension plan, he invested in a sure-thing real estate deal Madison recommended to him." "Let me guess," I said, my voice dripping sarcasm. "The deal fell through." "The deal never existed," Aisha confirmed. "The money went straight into that secret account of hers. She was stealing from him, too. He was so blinded by his own ego and infatuation that he never even saw it." I had to laugh. It was a bitter, joyless sound. My brilliant, charming husband, the man who always thought he was the smartest person in the room, was being conned by a 20-something embezzler. It was almost poetic. We spent another hour going over the evidence Aisha had collected. She had everything: bank statements, surveillance photos, cash-paid hotel receipts, forged loan documents, and now a full criminal file on Madison's activities that was ready to be handed to the prosecutor. And, of course, the DNA report, the irrefutable proof that cemented 15 years of deceit. I looked at the file, the neat tabs and organized pages that represented the complete demolition of my life. 25 years of marriage reduced to a stack of incriminating documents on the passenger seat of my car. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion washed over me, so deep it felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. "Aisha, can we do this?" I whispered. "Can we really stand up in front of 300 people and do this to our family?" Aisha reached over and put her hand on my arm. Her grip was firm, reassuring. "Simone, listen to me," she said, her voice serious. "What other option do you have? If you confront them in private, they will lie. They will manipulate you. They will turn Elijah against you. They will deny until you start thinking you're the crazy one. I've seen it 100 times. She was right. I knew she was right. Franklin was a master of manipulation. He could charm his way out of anything. This way, she continued. There is no escape. There is no room for lies. There is only the truth presented in front of everyone they tried to impress. This isn't just about revenge, Simone. It's about consequences. Madison has to face jail time. Franklin has to be held accountable not just for the cheating, but for the financial fraud he committed against you. This is the only way to make sure the lies stop forever. I took a deep breath, the stale air of the car filling my lungs. I thought of Elijah, his pale, determined face. I thought of Zoe, the daughter I never knew. I thought of the 25 years I had given to a man who had been lying to me since the beginning. You're right, I said, my voice clear and firm again. It's the only way. I started the car. Let's go. We have a wedding to prepare for. The final hours before the wedding were the most surreal of my life. I went home and resumed my role as the calm, happy mother of the groom. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie of my own life. I saw myself laughing with my cousins, complimenting my sister-in-law's dress, and assuring the caterer that everything looked wonderful. Inside, I was a coil of tension and grief, but outside, the picture of maternal pride. Franklin was in his element, socializing with the early arriving guests, accepting congratulations with a wide, confident smile. He pulled me aside at one point, his arm around my waist. "You look beautiful, Simone," he said, his voice a low murmur in my ear. "Isn't it a perfect day?" I looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man I had loved for more than half my life, and felt nothing but cold, desolate emptiness. I smiled back. Perfect day. My son Elijah was a mirror of my own forced composure. He greeted his friends, posed for photos with his groomsmen, and played his part perfectly. But every time his eyes met mine across the crowded lawn, I could see the same steel resolve reflected there. We were in this together. We were soldiers waiting for the signal to strike. The plan was simple, and Aisha had rehearsed it with us until we knew it by heart. She had arrived early, disguised as a member of the catering staff. Her professional audio-visual equipment was hidden in plain sight. She had connected her laptop to the large projection screen we had rented, supposedly for a sentimental slideshow of Elijah's baby pictures. No one suspected a thing. She had a small remote control in her pocket. When the time came, all she had to do was push a single button. I had my own role to play. I had prepared the divorce papers with my attorney a week prior, a fact I had kept secret, even from Elijah. They were signed and notarized in a sealed envelope in my clutch purse. I also had a flash drive with copies of every piece of evidence Aisha had gathered. One way or another, my marriage would officially end today. There was no going back. I wasn't just planning a confrontation, I was planning the first day of the rest of my life. At 4:05, I took my seat in the front row. The string quartet began to play, and the wedding party made their entrance. Franklin sat beside me, squeezing my hand with what appeared to be genuine affection. I felt a tremor of revulsion, but forced myself not to pull away. Madison appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white lace. She looked radiant, beautiful, and utterly fraudulent. She smiled at the crowd. Then her eyes found Franklin in the front row. For a split second, a look passed between them, a look of shared secrets, of triumphant conspiracy. They thought they had won. They thought they were just minutes away from cementing their perfect, deceptive future. Elijah stood at the altar, his face an unreadable mask. When Madison joined him, he took her hand. His expression never wavered. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning the faces until they landed on mine. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The officiant began the ceremony with the usual words about love, commitment, and fidelity. The irony was so dense it was nearly suffocating. I wondered if Franklin and Madison were even listening, or if they were already planning their next secret rendezvous. The ceremony continued. They exchanged vows they didn't mean, promises they had already broken 100 times. My stomach churned with every lie that left their lips. Finally, the officiant reached the critical moment. He smiled benevolently at the crowd. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." A silence fell over the 300 guests. This was the moment. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. I could feel everyone's eyes on us. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Then I stood up. The moment I rose, a collective gasp ran through the 300 guests. The air, which had been filled with the soft melodies of the string quartet and the warm afternoon breeze, suddenly became thick and silent. All heads in the garden turned toward me. I could feel their confusion, their shock, their curiosity, like a physical force. Franklin, sitting next to me, went rigid. "Simone, what are you doing?" he hissed, his hand grabbing my arm. "Sit down. You're making a scene." I shook his hand off as if it were a venomous snake. I looked past him, my eyes fixed on my son Elijah, who stood at the altar, his face pale but resolute. He knew this was coming. We had planned it. Then I looked at Madison, whose radiant smile had frozen into a mask of confused horror. "I'm sorry, everyone," I said, my voice clear and surprisingly steady. It carried across the silent garden. "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe the officiant asked if there was any reason this marriage should not proceed." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "And yes, I do. I have a reason." A wave of murmuring swept through the crowd. I saw Madison's father, Judge Ellington, begin to rise from his seat, an expression of thunderous indignation on his face. "Mrs. Whitfield, what is the meaning of this?" he boomed. "The meaning, Judge Ellington," I said, turning to face him, "is that your daughter is about to marry my son under false pretenses, and I believe you and everyone else gathered here today deserve to know the truth." I pulled the small remote control from my purse. It was the one Aisha had given me. My thumb hovered over the single red button. "The truth?" Franklin sputtered, his face flushing crimson. "Simone, you've lost your mind. You're embarrassing our son." "Am I, Franklin?" I asked calmly, turning my gaze back to him, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "You're the one who has embarrassed our son, you and your mistress." With that, I pressed the button. Behind the altar, the large screen that was supposed to show a slideshow of Elijah's baby photos sprang to life. The first image that appeared was a crisp surveillance photograph of Franklin and Madison, locked in that passionate kiss in our living room, the one Elijah and I had witnessed just the day before. The crowd erupted. There were screams, gasps, people standing up to get a better look. I saw Madison's mother bring a hand to her chest, her face ashen. "But that's not all," I continued, my voice somehow rising above the chaos. "You see, this wasn't just a one-time mistake. This has been going on for months." The screen changed. A new photo appeared. Franklin and Madison entering the St. Regis Atlanta, the timestamp clearly visible. Then another and another, a collage of their secret meetings, their clandestine lunches, their lies exposed for all to see. Madison stammered, trying to deny it, but her voice was lost in the uproar. Franklin was standing, shouting, "This is fake! Those are photo montages! Simone is having a nervous breakdown!" "Am I, Franklin?" I asked quietly. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The screen changed again. This time it displayed bank statements. My finger, on a close-up photo, pointed out the suspicious cash withdrawals, the forged signatures on the pension plan loan documents. A Cartier receipt for a $15,000 necklace flashed on the screen, followed by a photo of Madison wearing that same necklace at her bachelorette party. The noise from the crowd began to diminish, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. This was no longer just a cheating scandal. It was something darker. "My husband has been systematically stealing from our family's retirement savings to fund his affair," I announced, "and his fiance, the woman about to marry my son, has also been busy." The next slide showed the evidence of Madison's embezzlement from her law firm. the fake invoices, the bank transfers. I could see her partners in the fourth row, their faces shifting from confusion to pure fury. And then I delivered the final, devastating blow. "But the best part," I said, my voice turning to ice, "the true heart of the deceit that has defined my marriage, is that my husband's lies didn't start with Madison." The DNA test results filled the screen. The words, "probability of paternity," 99.9999%, were displayed in huge, bold letters. Below there was a photo of a pretty, smiling 15-year-old girl. "This is Zoe Jenkins," I said, my voice trembling with 15 years of repressed pain. "She is Franklin's daughter, a daughter he has kept hidden from me and his own son for her entire life." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people staring at the evidence of a betrayal so complete, so devastating, that even the most seasoned gossips were left speechless. And in that perfect, terrible silence, I watched the world I had known for 25 years burn to the ground. The silence was broken by a single, sharp sob. It came from Madison, who staggered, her face a ghastly white against the pure white of her wedding dress. Then she collapsed onto the ground in a heap of lace and shattered dreams. That single sound broke the spell. The garden erupted into chaos. People were yelling, pointing, pulling out their phones to record the disaster. Madison's mother ran toward her fallen daughter while her father, the judge, stood there, his face a mask of disbelief and utter humiliation. Franklin froze for a moment, his face a kaleidoscope of rage, panic, and mounting horror. He looked from the screen to me, to the stunned faces of his friends and colleagues. He was trapped. There were no lies, no smooth words that could talk his way out of this. His carefully constructed world had been publicly and irrevocably demolished. Then he did the only thing a coward could do. He ran. He bolted, shoving his way through the stunned crowd, knocking over a tray of champagne glasses as he scrambled toward the parking area. He was literally trying to flee the scene of his own life's implosion, but Aisha was waiting for him. My sister, still in her catering uniform, stepped out from behind a large oak tree bordering our property. She was a petite woman, but she moved with the confidence of a seasoned police officer. As Franklin ran past, she put out her foot. It was a perfectly executed trip. Franklin fell hard, hitting the manicured lawn and sliding for a few feet in his expensive wedding suit. "Going somewhere, Franklin?" Aisha asked casually, walking over to where he lay sprawled and gasping. By then, Elijah had left the altar and was beside me. He put a firm arm around me. Madison was back on her feet, supported by her sobbing mother, and pointed a shaking finger at me. You planned this?" she shrieked, her voice high with hysteria. "You planned this whole thing to ruin my life." "No, Madison," Elijah said, his voice cold and clear, cutting through her hysterics. "You ruined your own life, you and him." He gestured toward his father, who was now being helped up by Aisha. "Let go of me!" Franklin demanded, trying to pull his arm free from my sister's firm grasp. "Can't do that, Frankie," Aisha said, using a childhood nickname that made him flinch. "You see, I'm a licensed private investigator, and I have reason to believe you have committed multiple felonies, including financial fraud. But don't worry, we're not here to talk about you right now." She looked over her shoulder. "My business is with her." 2 uniformed police officers were walking calmly through the parting crowd. They weren't here for Franklin's fraud. That would be a civil matter for my lawyer to handle. They were here for Madison. "Madison Ellington?" one of the officers asked, his voice quiet but authoritative. Madison's eyes went wide with terror. "No," she whispered. "You are under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud," the officer continued, as his partner took her arms and gently applied the handcuffs. The click of the cuffs closing was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I saw Madison's face crumble as the realization hit her that this was not just public humiliation. This was not just a canceled wedding. This was real. There were going to be real, legal consequences. Her life, as she knew it, was over. As the police led a sobbing Madison away, her parents watched in stunned horror. The photographers who had been hired to capture a fairy tale were now capturing the fall of a prominent family, their flashes popping relentlessly. The crowd began to disperse. Some left quickly, not wanting to be a part of the disaster. Others lingered, whispering in shocked huddles, their phones still held high, recording everything. In the midst of the chaos, I finally felt my strength leave me. Elijah held me. "It's over, Mom," he whispered. "It's finally over." I looked around at the ruins of the perfect day I had planned. It was a mess. It was a nightmare. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. If you're still listening, would you do me a huge favor and hit the like button on this video and comment the number 1 below? It lets me know you've supported me and tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement to me. Please comment the number 1 and let me tell you what happened next. The 3 hours that followed the explosion were a blur of flashing blue lights, hushed conversations, and the slow, painful process of dismantling a wedding that never was. The police took our statements. Madison was driven away in a patrol car, her beautiful wedding dress looking absurd and tragic in the harsh glare of the setting sun. Franklin, after being questioned and released, simply disappeared. He got into his car and drove away without a word to me or his son. "And you?" Elijah asked, a flicker of the old warmth returning to his eyes. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "I think I'm just numb." The next few weeks were a painful, messy ordeal. The story, as expected, became a local media sensation. Scandal on wedding day, fiancé arrested at altar, groom's father implicated in decades of deceit. Our names and faces were everywhere. I stopped answering the phone. I stopped leaving the house unless absolutely necessary. My small CPA firm suffered. Some longtime clients quietly took their business elsewhere, uncomfortable with the notoriety. The day after the wedding, I did exactly what I had planned. I walked into my lawyer's office, my purse containing the signed divorce papers and the flash drive of evidence, and I filed. With the mountain of proof we had, Franklin didn't even try to fight. The legal process was swift and brutal. In the settlement, I got the house and a significant portion of his remaining assets as compensation for the fraud he had committed against our retirement funds. It wasn't a victory. It was restitution. Madison, facing overwhelming evidence, took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 2 years in a low-security prison and ordered to pay back every last cent she had stolen. Her family's reputation was shredded. Franklin's fall was quieter but no less complete. He lost his job, his reputation, and the respect of everyone he knew. He moved into a small apartment across town, and from what I heard, he rarely showed his face in public. But the most complicated part of the aftermath was Zoe. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received a letter. It was from Nicole Jenkins, Zoe's mother. It was short and to the point. She apologized for the pain her past relationship with Franklin had caused and said her daughter Zoe had learned the truth from the news and wanted to meet Elijah and me. I sat with that letter for 3 days. What was I supposed to do? This girl was the living embodiment of my husband's biggest betrayal, but she was also an innocent. She hadn't asked for any of this. She was my son's sister. I showed the letter to Elijah. He read it, his face grim. "I want to meet her," he said immediately. "She's my sister, Mom. She deserves to know her family, or what's left of it." So I made the call. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop in a town halfway between ours. I was terrified. As we waited for them to arrive, I twisted the napkin in my hands until it was a frayed mess. Then they walked in. Nicole was an ordinary, tired-looking woman who seemed to carry the weight of her secrets in the slump of her shoulders. And behind her was Zoe. The moment I saw her, my breath caught. Aisha was right. She had Franklin's eyes, the same dark, intelligent eyes that had made me fall for him all those years ago. She looked scared and uncertain, clutching a book to her chest like a shield. And in that moment, looking at this innocent girl who was a victim in all of this, I knew my anger was not with her. It was with him, always him. That first meeting with Zoe was awkward. Words felt clumsy and inadequate. Elijah, bless his heart, did most of the talking. He asked her about high school, about the book she was holding, about her life. He didn't ask about Franklin. He simply treated her like a person, like a sister he was meeting for the first time. I, for the most part, just watched, trying to reconcile the image of this shy, sweet girl with the monumental lie she represented. Slowly, tentatively, we began to build something new. We met again for coffee, then lunch. Elijah and Zoe started texting, discovering a shared love for old movies and spicy food. I found myself looking forward to seeing her, hearing about her life. She was bright, funny, and kind. She was an innocent soul caught in the wreckage caused by our parents. A year passed. Life settled into a new, unfamiliar rhythm. The divorce was finalized. The media storm subsided, replaced by newer, fresher scandals. I poured my energy into rebuilding my business, and slowly my clients started to come back. I sold the large family home with its yard full of ghosts and bought a smaller, more manageable townhome for myself. It was quiet, peaceful, and it was mine. Elijah, after months of therapy to work through the trauma of the betrayal, was thriving. He had left his corporate job and gone back to school to pursue his true passion, landscape architecture. He was designing beautiful spaces, creating order and beauty out of dirt and stone, a fitting metaphor for what he was doing with his own life. He was dating a lovely young woman, a kind, genuine librarian who looked at him like he was the only person in the world. And Zoe. Zoe had become a part of our lives. She came over for dinner every other Sunday. She and Elijah had developed a real sibling bond, teasing each other and talking for hours. I found myself feeling a fierce, protective love for her. She was no longer a symbol of betrayal. She was just Zoe, my son's sister, and in a strange way, a part of my family. One evening, about a year after the wedding that wasn't, I was sitting in the living room of my new home when the doorbell rang. It was Franklin. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since the day he fled our ruined reception. He looked diminished, older, grayer, the confident arrogance gone, replaced by a deep weariness. He asked if he could come in. I hesitated. Then I stood aside. He told me he was in therapy. He said he was trying to understand why he had done the things he had done. He apologized. He said he was sorry for the lies, for the betrayal, for the pain he had caused me, Elijah, and Zoe. I listened, and I knew he meant it, but an apology couldn't erase 25 years of deceit. "I forgive you, Franklin," I said, and I was surprised to find I actually meant it. Not for you, but for me. I can't carry that anger anymore. It's too heavy. I looked him in the eye. "But I will never trust you again. We can never go back." He nodded, a sheen of tears in his eyes. "I know," he whispered, and then he left. That night, as I got ready for bed, I found myself thinking about the woman I was a year ago, crouched in the dirt behind the hydrangeas. She was so broken, so lost. I wished I could go back and tell her that everything would be okay, that the pain wasn't the end of the story. The family I thought I had was a lie. It shattered into a million pieces on that sunny afternoon, but what Elijah, Zoe, and I built in its place was smaller, quieter, and imperfect. But it was honest. It wasn't built on comfortable lies, but on a difficult, painful, and ultimately freeing truth. We had lost everything, but in doing so, we had found something real, and for the first time in a long, long time, that felt like enough. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, or if any part of this has resonated with you, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter, and if you'd like to hear more, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Be kind to yourselves, and I'll see you next time.